chit chatty stuff in front of people. And who cares, right?
I thought
Who
we
cares?
were live.
That's it. So we are officially live now. So to that end, let me properly introduce you, because hopefully the people might know who I am. They probably don't, but let's properly introduce you anyway.
All right.
I am joined with by Roberta Cocco. And Roberta and I met about a year and a half ago. We were at a networking event. She was on the other side of the room, and like her energy was palpable. Like of all the people, the 40 some folks in that morning event,
Right.
she was the one I wanted to meet. And so I did what I always do. I sat there and played cool until she came over and said, "This dude feels like he wants to meet me." It's kind of how that worked. I don't think that's actually true,
Wow.
but I like how that
That's,
sounds.
yeah, that's fun. I
That's what
appreciate that. I'm gonna choose to believe that my energy was palpable and you wanted to meet me. So
those two things are absolutely 100% accurate, right? When you got up and you introduced yourself as a high performance coach, right, in that performance coaching space, those are words that I don't hear jammed together very often, so they really stood out. And I like the idea because when I tell people about the coaching I do, I always talk about I like to work with folks that have a seventh gear, right? Because they're the ones that I know are going to be able to move into that next level and really gain traction and take action. Maybe you've experienced this. Coaching's like an abysmal process when you're working with people that don't do the work. Do
yeah.
you do a good job of avoiding that?
Well, I do try to qualify, right? I like to work with people who already know how to get it done. We all find, right, no matter who we are, what we've done, we all run into different areas of our life where we're stuck, or maybe we want to take new ground and we just want somebody to run alongside for that synergy. Figure out, give us a clue as to some of our blind spots or the things that are sabotaging us. But yeah, if people aren't putting in the work, or they think that I'm going to work for them, that's arduous. That's arduous. So
Yeah.
all the love to those people, but whew,
Right.
they're
Sorry,
good.
sorry,
I'm gonna
sir. What
charge you
happened? Yeah,
double.
it's amazing, right? People do, they kind of forget what the roles and responsibilities are in the relationship, regardless of how clearly you define them. And
Yeah,
so I appreciate that. I've taken on coaching clients that should not, they should have been consulting clients,
yeah,
and that's fine. But I wouldn't have taken them on as consulting clients, right? I would have known that that wasn't a fit.
yeah.
So I appreciate that. So today, you and I were kind of chatting back and forth. One, I really just like the name Cocco-Bean. It cracks me up every time I see it and think about it. And I told you, I think a couple of days ago, my nephew had his second daughter, and he somehow convinced his wife to name her Coco.
Right.
And I am so jelly. I wish I would have thought of that when we had our kid 20 years ago. I would have named that kid Coco in a heartbeat.
Yeah, Coco-Bean. That would have been epic.
Cocco-Bean is great.
Yeah,
She won't even need like a fake stripper name. She already has one.
Terry. Yeah, I like to say, well, my husband, right? Like he's hot cocoa, which is nice. Yeah,
Nice. Yeah,
yeah.
I like that. That's very good.
Fun.
That is very good. So we were talking about doing some coaching, and I said, "Hey, you know what? Let's do this live because I've got things that I'm working on right now, and this is a good way to showcase kind of the coaching process. And so people that are thinking about having a coach or wondering, they can kind of see how you work, and see what the kind of process looks like. I'll probably learn a thing or 19, and I might end up doing some coaching in reverse. You never know.
Yeah.
It's hard to not coach when you coach, right? So
Well, that's
I'll be mindful of the word try, though. That I've learned in previous iterations.
yeah. I kind of busted you on that before.
I think
Well,
you just had it written down on the whiteboard.
I was, yeah, but we got this. I'll pull that out if I need to. But I'm excited about this, Terry. I really appreciate the opportunity to stand with you and to explore some things as a fellow coach, right? Like we need each other. What we do in an industry we need for ourselves. And so it's always sacred to stand with anyone, but to be able to stand with a fellow coach, it's an honor, and I'm excited for what we might explore and discover. I always learn things too, right? It's a great process. So, should we jump in?
Yeah, let's do it. Hold, you know what? Hold on for a half a second. I have the opportunity to shut this door, and I'm going to take it while there's
Do
0
it.
dogs in here. So
I would call that setting us up for success. There's a lot of things that we can do in our lives, little micro nuclear moments that help us succeed. So,
that's exactly it. That
bravo.
was like there was the perfect storm. I'm like, there's 3 dogs in this house, and 0 of them are now in this room.
Right.
Let's make sure that stays the same.
Lock it. Lock it down.
That's exactly.
Okay, so normally when I coach, I let people know that everything we talk about will be confidential, but we're live. So that rule is out.
So no, total gag order on the audience. You guys all have to keep this confidential. That's the
Right.
way it is.
Unless I do have a caveat, unless like we say something amazing or there's like a brilliant story, then you can share, but you have to change the names.
Okay, that's fair.
Excepting for mine, because
That's yeah. Please keep her name, and I would like to go with Dirk Diggler. That will be my name for future.
Perfect. Okay, so other than that, you're the boss. We're going to talk about whatever matters most to you. If I'm poking around someplace that doesn't make sense or isn't valuable, feel free to let me know. Coaching can be a little disruptive, so I might interrupt you. I don't mean to be rude, but if you interrupt me, like the name of the game is let's stay focused and talk about what matters.
Love it.
Okay, so then if we were to have this conversation like 3 months from now, you were still thinking about it, right? Like something that we talked about unlocked some potential or created some momentum or movement or clarity. What would we talk about? What would we be talking about?
So it's that's a great question. I love the idea that it could have that kind of impact, right? That long tail. So the things that are really on my mind right now is I was on a session with a guy named John Assaraf today, and he was talking about vision, goals, and strategy, and he was mentioning that most people come up with a strategy and they tie some goals to it, and then they create this vision. And he's like, it's so backwards, right? You have to have the vision, then the goals emerge from there where you're trying to go, and then you build the strategy to achieve the goals. And so as I was thinking about, all right, well, what's my vision? Well, I've got no less than 19 different vision statements floating around, written down, typed up over here, down there. And that's not clarity. That's just the spaghetti ball. And so it's going to be really hard to get to the things I want to get to with that lack of clarity. So that's an issue. The other issue is this thing that's been running through my mind lately about quality control and validation. I have been doing speaking, presenting, right, keynote training, um, fairly consistently and getting paid fairly consistently for 15 years. But I'm not like I have a friend of mine that's a Botox person. She does all those injectables,
Okay.
and she makes about twice as much money as I do speaking about injectables. Even though that's not her job, she gets paid to speak about the injectables from the injectable company and earns twice as much as I do. And I say I'm a professional speaker.
Right.
And so there's a disconnect. Like, if
Yeah.
you're really a professional speaker, why is the injectable lady making more money than you? I love this woman. She's like my best friend's wife. She's a great friend. No disrespect. She earns every second or every cent of it, but just a weird little thought.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that head trash is. And then, yeah, so those are the 2 things that I'm really wrestling with right now.
Okay. So lack of clarity, and just to be clear, you said you had about 19 visions. They all might be clear, but that's a lot to focus on at once. So I don't want to maybe necessarily get into that. like, is it bad to have 19, right? But we'll notice that it seems like you don't have a clear focus for action, and then the quality control. Where should we start? Like, what do we really want to talk about that's going to matter most to you?
I think getting that clarity on what I'm gonna do tomorrow and feel so good about it that I know I'm gonna take some level of repeated action 2 weeks from now and 45 days from now and 6 months from now. Right. So to have that just kind of this is this is who I am and what I do. Right. And to hold it so deeply that there's nothing else that makes me waver because I've spent the last 5 years, 6 years. Am I a coach? Am I a trainer? Am I a speaker? Am I a
Okay,
speaker,
so
a trainer, a coach?
so,
The
so
same.
are what so are we talking about who you are and what you do? Like defining that?
I think that the core of my issue is uh, like it used to be like this. Now I
Mhm.
think it's like this, right? But there's still a waffle, right? There's still a waiver, and I
And
think
welcome to this skin, Terry, because like as humans, right? Hey, everybody wants balance, and I'm like, let's just lean into the tension. Tension will create a foundation just as much as balance will.
mm,
So, so
welcome to the skin, people.
right. So who is Terry and what does he do? If we were to in the next 45 minutes or so answer that question, is that the most valuable questions to be answering?
So there was a period of time, and I'm going to answer your question with a
The
question.
story. Oh,
Yeah, and well, in a story. But there
yeah.
was a period of time when my LinkedIn profile, like at the header of it, said, if you asked 10 people, what does Terry Bean do? You'll get 10 smiles and 9 different answers. And I was like, yeah, that's brilliant. I love that shit. That's a good one, Terry. And about 6 months into it, I read it again and I was like, you're an idiot. Are you kidding me? Do you want to figure out how to confuse people even more? Because well done, you just did that. So I feel like our identity as humans, most of us working humans, we identify with the work that we do. That's our part of our a major part of our identity.
Mhm.
And so mine, like I said, I flip back and forth between some of the titles I play, but
Yeah.
at the role, like at the core, I'm a cheerleader, I'm a coach, I'm a communicator, I'm a strategist, I'm a guy who's a connector and shows people how to connect dots.
Mhm.
So those are all things that I do, and the outpouring of those end up being coaching, training, speaking. And so yeah, so clarity's I think important.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the original question though.
You want me to actually answer it this time?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
oh,
uh, and I'm going to play a little hardball with you with permission.
please.
Okay. So in our time, right? Like you did a great job of kind of answering in a little vague way, like broad strokes, who you are and what you do. Do we want to define that in a way that it resonates deeper, or do we want to talk about something different?
No, I think ultimately, like I said, if 3 months from now I walked up to you, that to me, having that clear sense of purpose that I can hang a hat on and go back to, and it's the same 3 months from now
Okay.
as it is. I think that's probably the best thing because that I
Okay, I'm
feel.
going to stop you for a second. So, because you know I like language, you
Mm,
said it's probably the best thing. So let's just slow down. Let me give you a second to really kind of marinate on it. If our conversation unearths Terry Bean's purpose, is that what at least for starters. Is that what we're chasing?
Yeah, let's call it that and go for it. Hell yeah. How
Okay.
about you like that answer better? Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay.
Hell
Purpose.
yeah.
Um,
She lives near a farm, people. You gotta get a little farm every once in a while.
yeah. I'm like, thanks for keeping the bar low. Nothing like asking me to come on here and help you find your purpose.
Okay, fine. Let's not do that then. That sounds like
No. If that's what you want, let's get it.
no. Well, here's the thing. I feel like I the good news for you is this isn't something I have never thought about. Right? This is literally shit that I've skull fucked 87 ways from Sunday. So with your ability to decipher nuance and call, hey, no, did you hear what you just said? It'll actually make it a little bit easier. I'm a fairly open participant in this. I feel like.
Yeah. Okay. So, purpose. That's what we're driving towards.
It's great that this is on video because we can watch everything you do now too. It's perfect.
Yeah. So the things that you do, right? I call them character traits: cheerleader, communicator, strategist, connector. Those are those are like character traits. If we'll assign that word to it, and then the title: coach, training, speaking. But the idea of purpose holds a meaning, right? So I wonder, what is it about these things that you value?
I value, like, at the core of who I believe I am. I value fun, right? That's like my all-time favoriteest thing. But I value growth and supporting the idea of growth. So for me, the reason that those things in particular, whether we're looking at the training, the speaking, and the coaching, or we're looking at the cheerleading, the communicating, the empowering, the connecting, those things all map toward growth, mine and others, and that's what I enjoy.
Okay. All right. So is it fair to start? And I think that truth is expansive, right? So I think we can start with a foundational truth and then we can grow it, expand on it.
Mm-hmm.
So is it fair to start with the definition that your purpose is growth for yourself and others?
I think so. I think that's a logical starting place.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because it ties into the work I did with Motor City Connect. It ties into TEDx Detroit. Ties in with the community stuff I've done over the years. It ties in with the
So
business.
you're turned into a disco ball again. And by that, I just wrote an article about
Mr. Shiny or what?
So disco balls, they throw light in every direction, and they're fun to watch. They're a lot of energy. Like, there's nothing wrong with a disco ball. Right? But
Do you have one at your house?
I might. Did you want my address? You can send it over. Amazon me. But when it comes to when people feel like there's too much going on or they can't get focused, right? Sometimes it's because they're a disco ball. And so turning all of that light into, I like the distinction is between a disco ball and a laser, right? A laser is, it's the same thing. It's light. But when we focus it in a specific direction, it becomes much more powerful, right? And so I think with one of your values being fun, it makes sense that you're drawn naturally. There's this gravitational pull to the disco ball. No shame, right? But I wonder how much more fun would be, or how much more fun you'd have if you were more focused, right? If your revenue was higher, if your quality control was solid.
Couldn't agree more. And that's love it.
So what What are some things that we could start to hone in on? Like, how can we begin to create some clarity around this growth and purpose for you and others? And then let's just maybe brainstorm like what would matter most about that.
So I've been working on this for a minute, right? This isn't news for me. It might be news to some. Um, One of the things I took accounting of was the number of training and presentation decks I have in my laptop. And I counted, without really going into Google Drive, I counted about 47 different decks.
Yeah.
And again, at the core, there's relatability, likability, communications, connecting, right? So you can use those stuff and apply them into leadership, into presentation skills, into networking, into sales, into marketing. So it's off the same branch,
Yeah.
but it would be nice to, back to that laser focus.
Yeah.
Tom Hopkins, one of the most famous sales
And I'm
trainers.
going to stop you.
Yeah.
For your 47 decks, if I was going to burn 46 of them, right? All the decks are on fire. Which one are you going in for to put out first? Do you know?
No, not at all. They're babies, right? They're like 47 little babies. And so there's 25 of them I would not even worry about looking for sure.
Okay.
There's probably 5 of them that would give me like significant anxiety if I might have lost. So, but I love the question.
Yeah.
But that's a good way to think through it.
Yeah. Right. And I'm just trying to, when we think about, because this idea of purpose, and I'm hearing all of the things that you've said. Who are you? What do you do? What's your purpose? Right. And I'm funneling it through like, who is Terry B known as, because of that little quip you gave. Right. So if we could define, if we had a deck around who Terry is, what are the highlights? What sets you apart and makes you?
That's like, I'm probably the worst person to ask that ever, right? Because the only thing I can ever give as an answer is the feedback I've received.
Okay,
That
hang on a second. You make me want to cuss, and I have this profound realization that we're being recorded, and I'm
cuss
just
away.
gonna behave. Uh,
I'd cuss
so I know. So
because it's fun.
watch your language, not your cussing language, but the things that you're declaring, right? So whatever actions that we're taking in life are motivated by our feelings, right? We oftentimes don't want to admit that, or we think that we're intellectual, we think that we're fact-based, right? I'm doing it because I have to, all different, but it's emotions that motivate us. Our emotions are created from the things that we believe, right? If I believe that Monday is terrible, then I'm going to wake up grumpy, justified, right? And then I'm not going to do much, justified, right? If I think that you're fantastic and I can't wait to get on this call, then I'm going to be excited and I'm going to show up excited. So when I asked you that question, you said, I'm the worst person to ask that question to. So let's just sit there for a second, right? Like, if you want to be the worst person, what if you were the best person to ask this question?
Fair.
And then you said, like, all I can answer is my feedback. I love the awareness, but that feedback is from the past. And every day you're a new opportunity. Like, who you choose to be today is not dependent on anybody's feedback or who you've been.
I couldn't agree with that more, right? Everything that I am today is based on who I was before, right? It has nothing to do with what I could be tomorrow. Love that.
Well, so if you couldn't fail, right, and you wanted to, and you were committed to define yourself with purpose and clarity, who would you be?
Hmm.
I won't hold you to it, but if we could just play.
So the one of the recurring like dream vision statement-y type goals is like me speaking to an audience of 10,000 people in one room,
Yeah.
right? So presenting to a group of at least 10,000 is frequent. Um, and I love that idea. And I think there's something really powerful there.
Yeah.
So,
So you are, so make a declaration around that so I can really hear the vision.
I will speak to an audience of at least 10,000 people and leave a lasting impact on them.
Okay. Oh, and so I will still puts it out in the future. Like I want you to own it in this moment.
Yeah.
So like I am. Is there any way to put any like music around or title? Because you said you liked titles. Do they call speakers who speak to 10,000 something different?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, 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 no.
Okay. So then Terry Bean, he can command a room of 10,000.
Yeah, true. And can and will.
Yeah. So Terry Bean. Um, so then let's just put it present tense. Terry Bean commands rooms of 10,000.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down too.
Yeah.
I spelled
Terry
my name
Bean.
wrong.
Hmm?
I said I spelled my name wrong.
Terry Bean commands rooms of 10,000. What else?
Um, what else? What else? What else? I'm a huge fan of leaving people better than I found them. Right? That is something that I in every interaction, right? Where we meet, I learn something, I'll help you see something differently, and we'll move on. And but you'll be better off for the interaction. So I Terry Bean leaves people better than he finds them is a true and complete statement,
Yeah.
uh, and one that means something to me
Mm-hmm.
because I tend to meet people where they are, right, as opposed to where I want them to be. But
Yeah.
I don't know that that's uh, monetizable. I mean, it can be certainly can be. So that's something. You're going to ask what else? Um, I'm really enamored with the idea of doing training. I've been sitting in this very seat doing virtual instructor led training over the past year, and I've trained several hundred people in that time in various skills and modalities. And I would love to be able to do more of that, right? I'd love to be doing 3 to 5 trainings per month, 2 hour sessions, and then 2 to 3 or 4 speaking gigs a month. And then if a couple of coaching clients fall through as a result of that, a few of the right people to coach, that's kind of what it should look like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching and training should be top of funnel. Excuse me. Speaking and training should be top of funnel for coaching and each other, right? I've long joked if you want to speak more, you have to speak more, right?
Right.
Just go present, and someone in the audience is going to invite you to come present to their audience.
Right.
I'm
Right.
doing this. I'm speaking at an event out in Holland, Michigan on Friday, and it was from an event I did 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Somebody that's going to be in this audience saw me speak, right?
So so you are someone who uh you are a speaker and a trainer. You command rooms of 10,000 and you leave people better than you find them.
All true. I accept, I appreciate, I hear, I embody that very
Mhm.
much.
What's missing?
Is this rhetorical? You're
I,
asking?
I have an idea, but I'm wondering if you can see it. It's one of your one of the things. So think about your complaints, because we complain about things we don't have, or we complain about things we have too much of,
Okay.
right? So what's missing? You are a speaker and a trainer who commands rooms of 10,000 and leave people better than you find them.
That's a full sentence, and I like that. Um, to me, what's missing is that's a pretty narrow amount of opportunity, right? There's not a lot of rooms with 10,000 people in them. That's not
Well, that's interesting.
that's not a frequent occurrence.
Okay.
It can be a thing, right? But it's not a frequent occurrence. Uh, you know, I would imagine Tony Robbins or Grant Cardone are speaking to people of that ilk, right?
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing that you get to decide. You get to choose.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, we get to create and recreate ourselves. So who you are today, right? Like, let's just think of The Rock. I'm not even sure who he is today. I just saw him having a birthday party with like a 4-year-old. But he was a wrestler. He was a actor. He's got a clothing line. So you get to create and recreate yourself. If you want to command rooms of 10,000 on a regular basis, and I don't think you'd have to do them that regular, you'd probably be making some pretty good bank at that point, right? Um, or you could command rooms up to 10,000. Like,
That's
where's
probably a better way to say it.
okay? And then is there so we could talk about like a sweet spot, but I'm still wondering what's missing.
I think what might be missing, um, there's a revenue component in there that I feel like is missing and is unclear,
Yeah.
right? Because you could buy your way on a Grant Cardone stage, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I don't. I like to get paid to speak, not pay to speak,
Yeah.
right? So there's a revenue component that is glaringly not here, and I think there's a scope or an availability of opportunity. The biggest event I've spoken to has been about 3,200 people, which is it's a nice sized crowd. Um, and yeah, again, I think there's got to be, the reality is in hindsight, right? That 10,000 person thing came in my head around 2008, 2009 when I was new to it, right? Um, I don't give a shit how many people are in the room right now if A, they're the right people, and B, the check looks right,
Yeah.
right? The priorities have shifted, if that makes sense.
So I want to invite you too, right? As you're looking to attract your ideal client and communicate who you are, it's essential that you know how to define the right people and that paycheck, because that's a powerful filter.
Yeah, yeah. So
And I want to oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I can define the right people, right? The right people are the folks that will either A, hire you again, B, refer you to other people, and C, and this one is probably not the most important, but it's certainly every bit as important as A and B, uh, that I enjoy working with. Right? I'm at a point now where the no asshole rule is strong with this one.
True. Okay, so you're looking for people that will hire you again, refer you to others, and that you can enjoy working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So hire you again, growth minded,
Mm-hmm.
right? What else? What else would help create a filter besides growth minded around hiring you again?
Um, we talked about it earlier. Folks that are going to do the work,
Hmm.
right? Because it turns out if you're not doing the work, you don't see the results, and if you don't see the results, you're less likely to hire the person again,
Yeah.
right? And so
So
that's
how
a
could you determine if they're going to do the work? Like what's a way we could measure that?
that's a really really good question because I don't. It's interesting because I've worked with a lot of salespeople in the past. Um, and salespeople, I've hired a lot of salespeople too. They're like super good at getting the job. And if they're not, they're lousy salespeople, right? Like lousy. If you can't sell somebody on why they should hire you, you don't get to be a salesperson, period, end of story. And it's off. The craziness is ensued. So I think there's something to be said about that. But I also, I'm trying to get back to the actual question before the interruption.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ability to just check in and ask them point blank, will you do the work? Right? Just asking is a simple way. A lot of
Yeah.
people think they will, but that doesn't mean they will. But it's a start.
Yeah. So then there's a certain kind of mindset or growth, right? So somebody that you can be authentic with, someone who's going to be who wants the accountability. I'm trying to hear you.
I like that. Yeah, somebody that knows, the similar situation to me, right? There's an awareness that I've got. I'm 98% of the way I want to be, right? 98. It's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But there's a twist and a turn and a little notch thing
Yeah.
that needs to be just adjusted, right?
Okay. So so they can do the work, so they know how to get it done. I mean that's how I say it in my perfect. Like I like to work with people who already know how to get it done. They just need a little chiropractic adjustment, right? It's not, and not that I wouldn't work with an entrepreneur or somebody who's like brand new and doesn't have the track record, but then you definitely want the growth mindset. You want them to be willing to be wrong, experiment, play, have that accountability or the awareness of where they're at.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the people that would hire you again. Is there any way to clarify or measure like how they would people that would refer you to others? And before we go there, let me just stop for a second, because we wanted to define who you were, your purpose, and we've got you commanding rooms up to 10,000, speaking and training and leaving people better than you found them. And so then I jumped into further clarifying like who these people are, and I did that without permission.
Yeah, but you did it so smoothly, I didn't even notice until you told me.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, is this the most valuable thing for us to pivot to next, or are we leaving anything on the table?
I think it's logical, right? And I think it kind of the reason we got here was because we were talking about, hey, if you're going to command this room, speaking and training, and there's going to be a bunch of people, and you're leaving them better than you found them, what's missing,
Right.
right?
Well, and you had said revenue was missing
Right.
as a point, which um,
And I feel like this is a component of that,
yeah,
right? Because I had a client of mine who said on more than one occasion, people who pay attention, right? And I love that line. Thank you, Michael. And I love that line. And there's something to be said about that. So people that are looking for those things might be likely to pay.
so here's an interesting question, and again, you get to choose, and we are kind of live, so we're sharing this with the world, all our thousands and tens of thousands that are watching. But I
Thousands in the arena and the millions around the world. Oh, sorry. You brought up The Rock.
uh, so there's a couple of questions, right? Do we want to spend some time and define your value? or do we want to define the people that you want to work with and what they what right, because there's different budgets. Like you could say this is what I charge and that's my filter, or you could say this is who I want to work with and understand that that's their budget.
It's interesting because the value proposition for me is the single hardest thing. You and I had this conversation a year ago, like maybe longer. Self-worth is like my bugaboo. Everything else, self-esteem, self-confidence, the ability to get up, show up, do all the things, no problem. Putting a value on it is brutal. And like, well, you heard it when you asked a question earlier. I'm like, how would I know? I'm like the worst person to ask that question.
Yeah. So let's just pretend like you're not committed to that
Yeah,
idea.
I'm not. I've let it go already. Can't you tell?
Yeah. And so then this new story that came up that um, defining my value is the worst. What if we just played with it? And I it's like interesting. It's interesting that you're defining the potential fee around your value. So if you'll indulge me.
Yeah, that's not always true, but go on. I want to hear where you're going.
Yeah. So one, like you bring value, right? Your experience, what you've learned, what you've invested for what you've learned, like that has value that is not connected to you. I mean, you have to articulate it, right? And then there's the value that they want to create. So if I'm going to speak to a room of 5 or a room of 50, there's a different value. And if I'm going to speak to, Apple's C-suite, or I'm going to speak to, Johnny's ice cream parlor's leadership team, there's a different amount of value that those two groups, maybe there's still 5 people apiece, will create. And so I will charge differently as a favor to them, right? I can't show up to $1 billion company and charge like $500. That just doesn't, that doesn't even respect them, right? Like, but I can't show up to a company that makes $500,000 a year and, charge them 50,000 for the afternoon. Right. So there's a value component in your audience and in how they need to put themselves on the hook and treat the experience.
That's interesting. And I say it's interesting because I was having a conversation regarding pricing and whether or not there should be pricing models on a website recently. My website, not any website. And my buddy was like, "You're not a commodity. You're in the service business, and that service is customizable. You really can't put pricing on a website." All right, good. I appreciate that. Makes sense. I love that idea. And I said to him, it's interesting. I still look at the person I'm selling to determine what the price I'm going to charge. Right. So I could do the exact same thing for two very different people, and it could have a wide ranging price tag on it. And that sometimes feels completely in integrity, and sometimes it feels totally out of integrity. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
It's vague. It's a broad stroke and it's a racket to keep you from defining what the heck you're worth. If I can just be clear. Right.
We got the whiteboard, folks. We're in trouble.
Wait a second. Let me say, and I mean this with all respect to everyone, right? Like no disrespect anywhere. But if you're willing to work for $5 and you're hoping to work for 5 million, that's a big freaking range.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
But it's so comfortable because, I feel like so noble when I'm working with these people and I'm treating them like those people. I'm a good person and I'm valuable, right? What's a little bit more difficult is to say, I don't work for example, for less than this. And if you can't afford that, you're not my ideal guy. Right. And I don't know. I just picked this, fives are the hot number today.
Hey, totally.
Right. Um, but I wonder what it would look like to say, occasionally I like to have low bono or pro bono clientele, people that I believe in, right? But maybe financially they're not in a place to make the same kind of commitment my ideal clients make. But mama got to buy shoes and bread, right? So I wonder, Terry, like what would be a growth opportunity for you to define a tight range?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense, and I'm willing to do that. And I appreciate that you're emphasizing a point. I was not really charging between 5 and 5 mil. Uh,
I,
Mostly,
I know.
it's really more like 5 and 12. Um, so no, it's I I know it's not the nobility factor per se.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
it's
and
not,
let me back up and say, like, I played a little more than I should have just now, right? Like,
yeah,
I put my my assumptions and my baggage, right? And the reason I still go to therapy occasionally in that.
well, and it's hard
We
to.
all of us solo entrepreneurs have, I think a range uh, that could be tightened up.
Well, and it's hard to keep in mind that it's not just the two of us having a conversation too, right? So you and I having that discussion is totally fine.
Right.
And to that point, it's probably all who's watching anyway. Just
Well,
so.
and so with that, right, like that might be a question or a thing to think about, right? Because that's just another filter,
Right.
right? It's another opportunity for you to attract clients, right? For people to understand who you are, what you bring to the table, who you work with. And I think there's something quite noble about that. I love to go to a store when it's got a price tag on everything, right? That's respect.
Yeah, that makes sense. Years ago, I remember wanting to charge like $750 an hour, but charge in 10-minute increments, right? So this is the rate,
Mm-hmm.
but I get that you're not swinging that, but
Mm-hmm.
listen, this is 10 minutes,
Yeah.
and because I'm like you, I'm a fairly quick study, right?
Yeah.
I've heard most of it before, and I can ask some of the right questions fairly quickly to get to the actual meat of the matter for everybody that doesn't look just like this. It's very hard to coach oneself, as you kind of alluded to earlier.
Yeah. Okay, so where can we, and I'll let you ponder that one, right? When I started in coaching, I knew coaches who would say, I'm a $50,000 coach or I'm a $20,000 coach. And they were talking about what it costs to work with them for 12 months. And I thought that was a fun, I have never defined myself like that. Like just um, use that as a filter or as a declaration, but it's an interesting thing when you think about the right people. Who's going to hire you? Again, they need to have a budget,
Yeah,
right? Who's going to be able to refer you? They need to have a network of a similar caliber and budget, right?
it's a good criteria, right? Your filters, as you used earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
Mm-hmm. So how do we use the last, assuming we're going 60 minutes here, we've got 11 hot minutes left. If we were to just scream it home and create the ultimate value with our time, like where do we go?
You had started along the path of value, right? And we had kind of teed that conversation up, and we were talking about it. Is it my value? Is it the value I bring, or the value they receive? And I really I don't have an answer for that question because I think both are important. In your mind, is one more important than the other?
What does my mind have to do with your income?
Nice. Well done. Probably not a lot.
But
And
is there somebody's mind or brain that you would want to pick? Right.
yeah, so realistically, it has been my experience that as much as I want people to care and give a shit and be like all interested, um, people tend to be more interested in themselves. So I assume that it's the value that they receive is probably greater than the value I bring. Now, those should track, right? They should be aligned. If I'm not bringing value in that's going to add value to them, it's the whole thing falls apart immediately. But I think
Yeah.
that's the problem.
This is kind of interesting. This could create a challenge in another filter, right? Like high performers like to be the best, usually, right? That's, I mean, otherwise, why are we trying so hard?
Mm-hmm.
So, as it relates to finding those people, right? It's like Terry Bean likes to work with people who create their own value, right? Who recognize what he has to offer and are capable of expanding off of it.
That goes back to the seventh gear thing, right? That's a really good way to say that and look at it. I like that because, um, yeah, they've kind of got to have that. I'm sorry, I have like a very special pen for my very special notebook and my very special
For their very special conversations.
for very special conversations, and my very special pen just very specially died.
Oh, that is
So,
if
so
I had
and
a trumpet, I would stop
I
it.
can't use any of the other 17 pens that I have sitting here on my very special notebook. So, all right, well, no more
Wow,
writing.
you are so committed to that.
It's a special notebook,
It's
Roberta.
fascinating.
Very
Okay, so I'm gonna type it out then. What exactly were we gonna write down that we didn't want to lose?
the committed to working with people who create their own value or
Mm,
who are committed to creating their own value is probably more like what it was said.
yeah. What um what would be valuable about messaging that? Like what would be valuable for Terry Bean and his purpose and persona, right? Like who he is and what he offers with that kind of messaging.
I think it eliminates a lot of the people that aren't sure whether or not they create their own value, right? So when I talk about messaging with my clients, I always say if your message doesn't dot your intended audience between the eyes, they're not going to see it, right? There's too much noise, so you have to create something that only speaks to the people that you're going for, right? Or only to a person who is going to be surrounded by like-minded folks. So in this scenario, I think there's a lot of people that would say, do I create my own value? I'm not really sure. And much like we were talking about before getting on here, video is a great way to filter out a bunch of people, right? You're going to see me on video and I might say the wrong thing or act the wrong way or carry myself a way that doesn't support you, and you're out. And that's fine. I'd rather know that right now than a month down the lane, a month down the way, right? I
Yeah.
want you to self-select out as much as I want you to self-select in.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. You know, it's a I want to say it's a great opportunity to invite people up, to invite people into their own value, to invite people to declare their excellence, right? It's not slamming anyone, right? It's the opportunity to say, hey, like I work with fantastic people. Are you a fantastic person? right?
Yeah.
And um, and that's an invitation to a party I want to go to.
Right. That's the line. The other line I use is you need to paint a picture that your ideal audience wants to see themselves in,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so the create your own value is definitely there's people that want to be in that photo.
yeah. So, so we were driving towards your purpose, right? What's been the most valuable, or and maybe you don't have it 100% clearly defined, right? But if we did it and got close, that's gold star for both of us.
Hmm.
Um, but where would you say we've landed so far? That's on this idea.
It's interesting because I think I this is going to sound weird and you're going to give me crap about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. In a way, you've kind of made it permissible to think along the lines that I've been thinking, with a little bit of fine tuning, right? And which, to be fair, is what I said 20 minutes ago. I'm right here. I'm just a little shaky. I'm not like all over the place. I'm real damn close, and so I think that is important. Um, I like the distinction between you know making sure that it's from their perspective of value, not from mine. And I feel like I've known that, but there's some, working through that conversation was very, very clear. And then, just kind of that distinction of who those right people are. And then the last piece is the idea of, uh, really getting clearer and tightening up that price range. Like, we have a minimum age for president. We don't have a maximum age for president. We should have one of those, by the way. Um, but I should have a minimum. I should have a minimum price point, and oh, by the way, here's a non-profit or a no bono or pro bono
Yeah,
profit price point, but low bono, I believe is what you called it.
yeah, I call it a low bono.
I like that. That made
Yeah,
me smile.
yeah.
So those are all things that I'm gonna work through. Like again, kind of like today. I was on that seminar earlier, and this all just the timing just maps and tracks really really well. Because otherwise, I'm going to be calling and asking you like, hey, you need somebody to help do some coaching for your people? Because I'm going to go get a job or some shit. I don't see that happening.
So to be clear, um, you're going to work on that price point to determine your minimums. Um, is there anything that might get in the way of you landing on a number?
Yeah, me,
What
right?
what what part of you?
Well, the part of me that has challenge with self worth, mostly, right? One of the things I have a
Have you
tendency.
ever had a garage sale?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever sold something and you're like, I'm just not sure what this is worth?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you deliberate over it? Did you go to therapy? Did you call a friend, or did you just slap a freaking number on it, Terry, and see if anybody bought that?
I'm throw it out and see what happens kind of guy. That's who I am.
So I want to invite you. Like, it's interesting to notice you've had a past history of getting tangled up in your value, right?
Hmm.
But but moving forward, like, what if you just played a garage sale game with yourself for a bit, right? Like, what's risky about that? Would there be something risky about that?
The only risk in that scenario is when people say yes too quickly, right? That's the only real risk, because the risk then means that you charge too little. That's the only risk. But if you're putting a price point on that you're happy to get, if someone says yes to it, that seems relatively risk free to me.
And if people say yes quickly, like, what kind of strategy could you create to raise your rates?
Well, you find a different project to work on fairly soon after, right? Or you add some, I don't know if it's time or effort or whatever to it.
Mhm.
Those are things that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to suggest, like, if people are saying yes, excuse me, we'll use small round numbers as to not offend. If people are saying yes to your $100 bids, right?
Hmm.
Um, then you could risk it. You could go up 10%, 20%, 30%, right? And if you're happy with the $100, you'll be thrilled with the 120. You might be disappointed if they said no to the 150, right? So then maybe you're going to back it down to 140. But I believe there's some sort of experimentation in discovering what people are willing to pay. Um, but that doesn't have to define what you're worth, right? It's an interesting emotional game potentially.
But that one, yeah, that's gonna sit with me for a little bit, right? What people are willing to pay really doesn't have anything to do with your actual worth, right? It's really like they're so flipping far apart that it's interesting that they showed up in the same conversation. But that's the I changed my earlier answer. That's the biggest lesson from this call today.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting. Most people, including myself, are more committed to money than anything else, and we don't like to admit it. But it's how we determine what house we buy, what vacation we go on, and sometimes our own self development, right? But at the same time, when we want to do things we've never done, when we want to become who we need to be, the one investment that we can make that guarantees us a return is the one on ourselves, right? And so I want to invite you to remember that you're worth the splurge for some, right? I was telling a guy, I think 2 weeks ago, I quoted him my price. And I said, if that's not enough to put you on the hook, I'll double it.
Nice.
Because money sometimes can make us all feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? And he appreciated it too, because it's like, that's kind of cheeky, but I have no idea what's in your checkbook. I don't care. I mean, I want you to make a sober decision. But more than that, I want to know what it's going to cost to get you to show up and create some value for yourself.
And then people who pay attention, right? And there's something really, really, powerful in that lesson. And I personally, I think you've done an awesome job, and I thank you because I know this isn't like some light, frilly conversation that we just went through. You had no clue that I was gonna, kind of hit you with this.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I didn't either. Right? This was as organic as it could be.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting state of affairs. So people, you can find Roberta Cocco at robertacocco.com. You can also find and follow her right here on LinkedIn. Go check her out. She puts a lot of good content out. She's really easy to work with. She will slap you upside your head when you need it, but kindly, right? For the most part,
With
kindly,
love.
with love,
With
right?
love.
But yeah, no, yeah, I'm a big fan. I really am, and
Thanks.
so I'm grateful for the time we spent.
Yeah.
And don't go anywhere because I'm just going to end the stream and then we'll talk for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Uh, but anything that you would like to add, share, say?
Well, I would just say, in case we forget when we jump off of here, as it relates to you, let's put a deadline on when you're willing to be done with that price list or that minimum, right? Let's get you on the hook for that. And then I want to make sure that I also just appreciate you. This has been fun. This is one of my favorite things to do, is to jump on and not know what we're going to create. But I do know, right? Like, I'm showing up for you. Hopefully you feel listened to in ways that maybe are new, right? And heard. And we all get better when we get space to play in and to risk. and discover. So thanks for doing this with me. This was fun.
My pleasure. My distinct pleasure. And I'll tell you what, I got some windshield time on Friday, which is gonna lead to some windshield time on Saturday on the way back. And so I'm gonna have clarity and consistency around those things by Monday.
Nice.
It ain't play around time. It's like get it done time. So I'm
Love
all
it.
in. I'm
Love
all
it.
in. So, all right, I'm going to end this stream. Thank you to you who sat here and watched. I'm going to go with Tracy in Wisconsin because everybody should know Tracy in Wisconsin. And we'll see you soon. Roberta, I'm going to see you as soon as I hit this end stream button.
All right.
Bye. And so we're